Okay, so we're gonna go over the static keyword in Java. So I'm gonna create a new class in a different file called object.java. Okay, so pretty much what I want to do is every time we call this class, I want to be able to see how many times we've called this. Okay, so let me do public class object. Okay, and then here we're gonna set up uh, we're gonna set up a variable. It's gonna be called int num of classes. Okay, so right now it's now 0 because we haven't called it yet. And then let's set up a constructor, public object. We're not going to pass in anything in a constructor. Okay, but every time we call our constructor, our num of class needs to increment by 1. Okay, so we'll do plus plus here. And then at the end, let's get our num of classes. Hold on, sorry, let me do public. Alright, and so we just return num of class. Alright, so that's pretty much it. Now we're gonna what we can do actually is we can, before we ever call our object, we can actually see beforehand the num of class value. So to do this, what we just do is literally call our file name object, or sorry, our class name, and then we do dot get num of class. Okay, and this should print out 0 because we didn't make any we didn't call sorry, we didn't call our constructor yet at all yet. So now let's do object. Let's call this ob1 is equal to new object. Okay, and then obviously we're not passing in anything in our constructor. All right. So now if we were to do system dot out dot print line, and we do ob1 dot get num of class, this should display 1. Okay. Now if we call another object, so let's call this ob2. Okay, and we do system dot out dot print line, and we do ob2 dot get num of class. What you're going to see is this is also going to display 1, but we don't want that. We want it to display 2 because we called our object class 2 times, but it's going to but every time we call in our object, everything resets for that variable. So see how object 1, uh, all the code in here is unique to that object 1, and then object 2, it resets everything. So like whatever changes we made at object 1, everything gets resetted for object 2. Okay, so what are we supposed to do here? What we can do is, instead of doing public int num of classes, we could do uh we could do static int num of classes. Okay, so if we do static, uh every time we call in our class over and over again, this doesn't get resetted. Everything else gets resetted in the code, but whatever static does not get resetted. But the next problem is, since we're returning a static variable, the method also has to be static as well. So this is an instance method because there's no static in here. But you can only return in a static variable if the method is also static. So this one, you'll put static int get number of classes. Now if we were to run this code, this would display 1 and this one will display 2. Okay? So like if you had another variable, let's say int val, I guess, val is equal to 0, and then you have val increment by 1, and then you write another code called return like static int get val and return val. Since val is not static, it's going to reset every time you recall object. Okay, but num of classes is not going to change. It's going to stay the same because it's static. Now I'm going to do another thing. So let me create a new file. Public class A. Okay, so in here I'm going to do int I is equal to 5 and static int k is equal to 2. Now public static void main. Okay. So in here I'm gonna write the following. Int of j is equal to I, and we're gonna call in a method m1. Okay, and then we close our main. Now here I'm gonna do public void m1. Okay, and then here it's I equals I plus k plus m2 ik, and then public static void, sorry, int. I'm gonna return it an integer m2, int I and int k, and then I return. So we're gonna do a cast math dot power of I and I to the power of k. Okay, so there's stuff wrong in this code right now. So the first one is here. So I is an instance variable because see I is not static here, but j is a static because it's under public static void main. So j is static, but I it's not under public static void main. So I is instance and j is static. And then the next problem is this m1. So it's under public static void main. So that means when we call m1, this has to be public static void, but it's public void m1. So that's the other problem. We're trying to call an instance method. So to fix, but the code under here, so this is an instance method, but we have a static variable here, and that's fine. Since static and instance variables can be used in an instance method. However, it can be only if you have a static method, only static variables can be used inside it, not instance variables. But if you have an instance variable, if you have an instance method, then static and instance variables can be used inside it. So what we can try and do to fix this is do a equals new a. Okay, so we're just calling this class here. Then we're gonna do int j is equal to a dot I. Okay, so we call in a and then we get I from class A. Okay, so this is actually fine. And then what we can do is when we can call this method by doing a dot. So we go into class dot m1. Okay, and then we access this method. So this is how you would properly write this code.